Welcome to Missions Life, where we share resources and encouragement for current missionaries, future missionaries, and those praying for missionaries. Missions can be hard, and we want to help you face the challenges of life, leadership, and ministry. We want your life to bear fruit for the gospel wherever you are. I'm Kyle Ferran, here with my co-host and wife, Heather. Hello there. Today on the podcast, we have Jerry and Char Pelfrey, and we'll be talking about healthy marriages in ministry. And we've known Jerry and Char for the past 9 years, and Jerry has been the senior pastor of Grace Baptist Church in Mason, Ohio for 38 years, has done intensive counseling for 3 decades, has served as chaplain for the city of Mason, and is an active civil organization. And Char has served for many years, for 16 years on the Mason City Council, and was one of the former mayors, and now serves as one of the board members for ABWE, our mission organization. Jerry and Char have 4 daughters and have been married for 44 years in June. And we've asked Jerry and Char to join us and chatting about healthy marriages in ministry. A few fun facts about Jerry and Char. They have 2 daughters and 8 grandkids on the mission field serving in Tanzania. They're a sending church to 8 missionary families, and they seek to help missionaries build and maintain healthy marriages. So Jerry and Char, welcome to the Missions Life podcast. We're looking forward to our conversation today about healthy marriages in ministry.
Before we jump right into all of our questions, could you guys share a little bit about your journey into ministry?
I'll give some historical or geographical context. The Ohio River divides Kentucky to the south and Ohio to the north. So we were raised on the southern part of the Ohio River, Kentucky. And then all of our ministry, the 5 years of student ministry, and then the almost 39 years of lead pastoring has been in the southern Ohio region. So we're only about an hour from home. But our family, we were not raised in church, but I had wonderful parents, non-believers, but they were great, and invested a lot of time into me and my younger brother. 4 years difference between Jerry, me, my brother Terry. And then at age 12, my brother came to Christ, which would put me at 16. Shortly after, my dad came to Jesus Christ as for his Savior. And there was quite an influence that my dad had in my life. I'm 16 years old, raised in the 70s. The last thing on my list was attending church or really putting any interest in God. But through my dad's testimony and God's grace, about 3 months after my dad's salvation, I came to Christ. I would have been a junior in high school. Couple months rough start as a brand new Christian, but by June of that same year, I turned 17. God had really done a work in my heart to completely follow him. I had 1 year left in high school. And during that time, God prompted me to pursue ministry. That led us to Springfield, Missouri. I was a year ahead of Char. And after graduation, as stated earlier, we came to Fairfield for the youth ministry and then moved on to Mason. We're only about 35 minutes from our original ministry. And during that time, one of the first things we started doing was investing in missionaries. And our school was pretty good at promoting 2 things, church planning and missions. So that was birthed in us. And God has developed that and continues to develop that over these years.
I was raised in church, went to the same school as Jerry, and it was so exciting to see Jerry change from, as he said, the 70s teenager to a young man who had a passion to know and love and serve God. Being raised in church, going into the ministry wasn't something surprising for me. I just remember every time a missionary would come to our church, my heart would just pound because I was so excited to hear their stories and how God was working in their lives.
What do you feel as you're thinking about marriage and ministry? What do you feel some of the greatest joys of married couples serving together in ministry?
I think the best way to answer that for us is that God has deeply placed within our hearts a conviction that there's no greater truths that can enter anyone's fallen, finite minds than accurate information about God as revealed in the scriptures. So, the greatest joys that we have is to be able to sit down, whether it be with an individual or a couple, Bible study class, or the congregation at large, and remind them that we are hearing the best information that anybody could ever hear, and that the gospel of Jesus Christ is the only message that's relevant for the 7-8 billion people on this planet. So that joy that's in our heart for God through his scripture, and to share that with others, and then to watch those who respond with an eagerness to want to learn more, that's just a thrill that motivates us and gets us through any forms of discouragement or doubt.
Yeah, I can only agree with that with Jerry. And just more on a technical level, Jerry and I are both organizers. He's firstborn, I'm an only child. So we are by nature organizers and planners and visionaries. And God has so richly blessed us in that we enjoy doing that together in the ministry. And so it has been a joy working together, he and I. On projects from when we were in youth ministry, or as our church started with 10 people to the growth that it has now. But to be honest with you, from your question, some of the greatest joys in ministry, I think, are ministry, but then also understanding that while in ministry, we're also a couple, we're also parents. And we need to get away for the sake of the ministry and our family, and just decompress from the pressures of the ministry whenever possible. And, we love a good adventure like I guess anybody else. And so when we were young, we didn't have a whole lot of money in the ministry, but we bought a 6-person tent and an older boat, and we played with our kids from their youngest days till they graduated. They enjoyed a life outside the ministry where we took them hiking or boating, or we were camping out in the mountains. And that was a treat for them, and memories that we'll always have together, that we were not just a family in ministry, but a family, the Pelfrey family, who loved the Lord, loved the church, loved each other, and wanted to spend time together.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. That's some joys that we've also enjoyed as a family too, to be able to have those special things, to be able to minister together, as well as you do have a different schedule, a bit more, maybe sometimes you have more control of your schedule in ministry, not always, but sometimes you do have more flexibility there to be able to choose when to be able to invest those times in your family. And that is a real joy to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's really neat to hear, after so many years together ministering as a couple, that you can look back and I can hear your smiles as you're sharing some of those joys. And that's really crucial, because I think there's a lot of challenges that also come in working together in ministry as a couple. I know a basic one for Kyle and I is that we work together day in, day out. And so when we go out on a date night, what do we talk about? We've already talked about everything. But what would you guys say are some of the challenges that you've ran up against, or that you've watched other couples in ministry face?
Well, one advantage of having 40 plus years of vocational ministry is to see that those challenges have definitely changed through the decades. In the early years, there would have been more pressure, and this would be speaking to those just beginning ministry or considering vocational ministry. But in those early years, that external expectations from fellow believers, family, and friends, but that can be challenging. But even the internal pressure that you put on yourself, because we're following Christ, and that's a very, very high standard. And sometimes our personal and even Biblical perspectives can be unrealistic. One example would be in my 7th year of ministry. God just brought an older gentleman in my life who had pastored for years and gone through some challenging times. And he began to invest in me, and he began to question me and have me question myself. Here's one hopeful and I think a helpful illustration. I'm 29 years old. He's probably 40. And he had heard me speak at a pastor's conference, and I was the first speaker, and he's coming in, the fourth speaker, because he was the out of town guest. And we had never met. And he asked to have lunch with me. And we're sitting down for lunch, and he says this to me: "Hey, Jerry, I really like your passion, your energy, and so forth." He said, "But you made a statement in your sermon, and it concerns me, and I want you to think about it." So here's this guy I've never met, and I'm thinking, what did I say? And the illustration was this: I was just talking about how I had done something stupid, not sinful, but stupid. And I remember God saying to me, "You're so stupid, Jerry." And then here's what he said: "Jerry, God never calls his children stupid." That may have been your voice. That may have been the voice of others. That may have been the voice of your spiritual enemy. But I assure you, God doesn't call his children stupid. And you're a young pastor. And if you don't learn how to discern between the voice of God in your own voice and the voice of critics, Jerry, I'm concerned you're not going to make it. And I just fell in love with that guy. That he would speak that type of truth into my heart. So that was a huge win for me that got me on a journey. And I like the word process because I'm still in a process working through these challenges. But I would think, to answer your question, what's up towards the front are expectations, to make sure that they really are biblical and that we're seeing them accurately.
For me, and this is my personality, not all women are like this. I think many are. I tend to get emotionally involved or upset or affected greatly by church issues. At times, and right now our church is doing beautifully, but there have been seasons of horrific challenges. And I can say it's not just in the church, that will happen in the mission field as well. That's just ministry, where unexpected things happen and unexpected people say or do hard, challenging, mean things at time. And man, that can take me down. And I get upset. I can get physically upset. I can ponder, I can worry and fret about those kinds of things. And for me, those are the hardest challenges to overcome. I still do. I still have a tendency to think about things that maybe I said, I wished I wouldn't have said, or things somebody else said to me and I don't know what they mean. I can't even list all of those. But what has helped me more than anything, that's a great question, Heather, is I have to literally write down on a note card a passage and hold it in front of my face as I go through the day. Philippians 4:6-9 has just calmed my spirit year after year after year on putting my mind on thinking on the right things, on the things that God has listed for us to think of. And that from that comes peace in the middle of a storm. Doesn't change the storm necessarily, but it can allow me to stand back up and think and respond biblically.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
As you guys are both talking there, the phrase that came to mind was that we are always talking to ourselves. Like throughout the day, we are always talking to ourselves, and we try to kind of trust ourselves because we think we're a pretty trustworthy person, but we're not always speaking truth to ourselves. And
Exactly.
just that idea of making sure that we are getting truth into our minds continually, whether through the Word of God or truth phrases that we remind ourselves of, or just question ourselves: is that really true? Like, Jerry, like your friend was asking you there, just to think about that. It's such a great reminder that we need to be focused on that. Well, another question there for you is, what practices or habits do you see in couples who have healthy marriages in ministry? Those that you've observed, what do you notice of some patterns there in their lives?
Well, you can imagine after all these years in ministry within pastors and missionaries, we do know a lot of couples. And I think that's a great question, because I do think I see some practices and patterns that we can kind of lay out. And it seems to me that couples that do better in ministry are those that, even though their personalities may be different, their time abilities in ministry may be different, they still work as an intentional team.
Mm.
And that's not always easy, because, the wife may be doing this, she may have to work. The husband is throwing himself passionately into the ministry that God is, and you can divide. And it can slip so quickly that he does his thing, she does her thing, and a marriage can only take that so long. So I think being cautious to say we're a team here, and maybe a husband not being as passionate to serve the church where, or the mission field, where it takes away from his ability to be a husband and an attentive parent, a fun parent,
Hmm.
and a mom not to be so upset or grounded into what she's doing that she can't focus into what the husband's doing, to continually mesh their lives together. And that will look differently for every couple. Everybody's different in how that's going to look. But for me, God has always tried to help me be kind of the one who keeps things light and humorous in the ministry. And I think our kids have appreciated that. My husband's a very passionate man. Over the years, I think his humor has dwindled down, just because the ministry has been a bit draining. But just keeping some fun in the home, laughter, getting away from the ministry, just getting away, just so that we can refresh and love and serve God better, and to be a couple. So, Jerry and I can still laugh. We can laugh at ourselves in ministry. Honestly, situations that may not always seem so funny at the time, but, we're able to back up a bit and realize there'll be another church issue, there'll be another missionary issue tomorrow. So we can't stay bogged down on this.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying is that taking a vacation is not unspiritual.
No.
Oh, I love that. But I mean, that's something that we're constantly trying to permission give and really say, when's the last time you've played together? I love that concept of laughing together, because that means you really have to put down some of the burdens for that time at Jesus's feet and just laugh with your family, enjoy each other. And it can get hard when things just keep bombarding you, or when there's angst or difficult situations surrounding you. Jerry, I want to give you a chance to answer that too, but also thinking, hey, Jerry, what are some mistakes that men or husbands tend to make?
Yeah, well, to your point again, that older pastor who began speaking into my life, and we brought him into grace probably 7 or 8 times over the years, because I wanted to hang around him as much as I could. He told me at one time, Jerry, you need to know this. When you're on the beach on a Tuesday with your wife and 4 girls, you are honoring God just as much as you are on a Sunday morning standing before a congregation with his word open. Now, let that sink in. Now, I'm not saying that was real easy for some, 30, 35-year-old pastor to take in, but I mean, I heard it. And, but like a lot of truths, sometimes it's a process for it to really become a part of your life. But in regards to this question, some of the mistakes that I would see on the flip side of which would create unhealthy marriages, I think it goes back to the number one challenges that we all have, and that is the importance of good communication. So either the lack of communication or the wrong kind of communication. And there are some basic tools that can help us work through that. Now, some husbands and wives just talk a lot more than others. It's just their nature and personality. We're fortunate enough from the time we started dating 46 years ago to now, we are not really shut down people. We sit down, we talk about it, we try as a principle. Don't believe everything you think. And Kyle, that goes back to what you stated earlier about how we can, get some things wrong, and that's where the body of Christ is so important. Where these friends of ours come in and say, "Hey, Jerry, rethink that, or revisit that." So let me throw this out. It's familiar to a lot of people. We just call it like the four principles of communication out of Hebrews. I mean, out of actually Ephesians 4, and it's like a roadmap. Nobody gets it right all the time. That's the beauty of Christianity, and I remind our congregation of that. I like the word consistently following Christ, because nobody's going to get right all the time. But if you practice these by the grace of God, uh, your marriage is going to benefit. So it'd be honest, uh, and I don't tell Char everything, but there's not anything I can't tell her. The second one's keep current. The passage says, "Don't go to bed angry. Don't let the sun go down on your wrath." So it's so important to work through conflict. It doesn't mean you'll fix it that night, but what it does mean is you don't take issues that have potential to hurt your marriage and then just say we're not going to discuss it. So you have be honest, keep current, attack problems, not people. In other words, stay on the issue, and then act, don't react. And all of these are easier said, taught, than practiced. But that's the Christian life. That God, we know these, but in order for us to desire them and to practice them consistently, it's going to be your grace. And let me give this one Bible illustration, because we're in Nehemiah right now in our 9:15 foundation Bible study classes. In Nehemiah 5, it talked about he was being so angry at how the Jewish people were abusing their loans to fellow Jews as they were trying to rebuild the wall. And the text says that he became very angry, but then he seriously thought on how he would respond. And I go, he got it right. But we know as we read the rest of Nehemiah, he gets angry towards the end of the chapter. Oh, he's pushing people, he's punching them, he's pulling their hair. And I just love the reality of Scripture. So he got it right in chapter 5, but he sure blew it later on. So I think just to come clean and say, you know what, be a good confessor. You know what, Char, the tone that I used, that was not appropriate. It was wrong, and forgive me. And the benefits will be enormous on just some of those basic tools of communication.
Those are really good points there. Just listening to something the other day, or reading something the other day, where it was talking about your third point there of attacking problems, not people. And one of the ways they'd phrased it was to attack problems side by side, not face to face. Because then you're really looking together at the problem and working on that, and that really also then affects that fourth one you mentioned there of acting, not reacting. And when we're working on a problem, we're less likely to be emotionally high strung over something than if we feel that it's a direct attack with the other person and a conflict with the other person. You're really just trying to work together on something. So those are great points on there. Another question for you was, what do you wish you would have done different earlier in your marriage and ministry?
No, it's okay to say we got it all right from the beginning. Like it really is.
No, I tell our congregation, and I told Char and our girls, the strength I have in my Christian life, and it's by the grace of God, obviously, is I'm a good confessor. I don't want to go to bed, with failures or sins that I haven't addressed. So that is something that is very helpful. Now, to answer your question, what have I had done differently? About 15 years into my ministry, I mean, you had a new congregation, it's growing, and I was given some advice to put Char and my kids on my calendar. So here I have my
Mm.
big desk calendar, and I'm filling it up with meetings and so forth. An example, I wish it wasn't true, but this is the reality of it. A member stuck his head in my office door there and just said, "Hey, Jerry, we'd love to have me and my wife have dinner with you and Char." And as he's standing there, I'm literally looking at my desk calendar and I'm going, "Oh, okay." I flip it to the next month and I go, "Okay, I don't have an evening open for like 40 days, but I have like Tuesday of next month open. Oh, put us down." So sure enough, I write in Phil and Sue. And then someone said to me, "Jerry, why aren't you taking that calendar? And you're taking certain days and you're just putting on there Char and the girls. A few days later or next week, Char and the girls." People don't need to know. It's not any of their business when you just say, "Hey, I'm sorry, that's not available." But I was filling it with some legitimate needs from the congregation, but many of them weren't, and they certainly weren't emergencies, though they may have felt like they were, and trying to navigate through how do you control this issue of people who are out of control, not to let them control you or your schedule. So that's what I really would have done different. But you go back into the mid to late 80s, early 90s. I mean, our first 20 years of ministry, you got three Sunday services between Sunday school AM and PM, Wednesday evening Bible study, Thursday evening visitation, Saturday visitation. You have an evening or two of counseling. That really is ingredients for some real problems. In 1 Timothy 4:16, I think I wish I'd have earlier in my marriage and ministry would have discovered that passage where it says, "Take heed to yourself." So there is a sense that self-interest can be good and selfishness can be sinful. And here Paul's telling Timothy, this is a pastoral letter. You take heed to yourself. Know your strengths, know your weaknesses, know when you need to get some rest. And that was a little difficult for me coming from a blue collar home and getting thrown into ministry again with all those expectations. So I think I would say to the younger Jerry, you don't have to be this busy. And I didn't have like a God complex. It was just like, oh my goodness, there's people who want to talk and I need to talk to them. And instead of just saying, all right, you know what, let's meet, but this week isn't going to work.
I totally agree with Jerry. And I was raised obviously in the 80s as well. And that work ethic from my parents and then from those that discipled me put that work ethic even harder on us in ministry and almost in a shame-based atmosphere of if you didn't produce and if you didn't see this and this expectation happen, then you're not serving well. And that could be from a church, but I can imagine being a missionary and looking at the expectations of those who are financially supporting you and then wanting a newsletter every month. So that's hard, but I just think understanding that there are for a husband, but also for a wife, that there are truly seasons in ministry. I can do more now to be a support to our church and to Jerry than I could when my 4 girls were home. And I don't really look back on my mothering with my 4 girls with horrific regret, but I never took really time for myself. It was either the girls or the ministry, and it was hard. I worked too hard and didn't rest, and I mocked the word rest. And now I realize that rest is a biblical, not a suggestion, but a command. We are to rest in ministry, our minds, our time with our family. But I also think that Problems in ministry, whether it be the church or the mission field, they're going to occur no matter how hard you work or how sincere you are. And sometimes those can be long lasting and horrific. And there's no shame, Heather, in getting godly support from biblically sound advisors. Sometimes those of us that are counselors now need to be counseled. And that's a biblical thing. And I think I wish I would have known that sometimes things don't end up as we expect, or they don't make sense on this side, never. And God will work good in it, but we won't understand it on this side. And it often doesn't have a thing to do with how hard we worked or what we said or how it was managed. It's just life, doing life on this side in a fallen world.
Yeah. A follow-up question from what both of you guys have shared. What would you say to couples that are feeling the pressure of kind of being in a fishbowl,
Yeah.
the pressure of having it all together?
Yeah.
How can a couple go about saying, I'm not okay, or we're not okay, when you're in ministry or on the mission field?
Yeah, and that goes back to the expectations, isn't it? That
Yeah.
hearing a lot of voices out there, being able to discern the right kind of voices. The Apostle Paul, writing to the congregation there in Corinth, some great advice he gave. One was about comparing ourselves among ourselves. There's a reason that's in there because we can do that, and it's going to create one or two problems: pride or despair. So either way, we're going to lose. So we have to work through that. And again, I would want couples to know this, and then start with the individual, the husband or wife. Kind of know yourself the best way you can through God. In other words, this is how He made you, and there are strengths and weaknesses that you're going to have, and we are in our sanctification process. And if we're pastoring a church, whether in the States or in a foreign field, or we're sheep leading sheep. So it's okay to realize I missed it here. I blew it here. And just to acknowledge that. There's such a freedom, I think, that comes with, I could have done that better, or that was just flat out wrong. And even couples in the ministry will need counseling at times. And Char and I have had counseling. And it wasn't because of our marriage, but it was because of things that was happening in ministry. And sad to say, just to be transparent here, you go back nearly a dozen years ago, there was such pressure dealing with potential church split. I ended up in the hospital. I collapsed right here at the house. And the girls were here. Char was here. They didn't know if I was going to die. I didn't know where it was going to end. Couple days of just some tests, and everything was fine. And the doctor, in layman's terms, said, well, what happened, Jerry, your body literally rebooted. You were under such stress that your vitals went to the lowest possible position, and you just went unconscious. So it's amazing how you can know these things and still let them get a hold of you. So as humbling as it is, and it is, just to reach out sometimes to someone and say, hey, man, I'm really out of some proper lanes here, and I need somebody to speak to me. But missionaries and pastors are hard people to counsel. But I would encourage couples in ministry, reach out to others, share some of your challenges, and just rest on this incredible grace of God, and to realize, again, we're in our sanctification process, and it is a lifelong journey.
And
As we
Jerry
go ahead, sir.
has been so great over the years in letting the congregation know that we are just people, and he's never put our family in a box setting on stage or in the limelight in any way, and it has given us such freedom. We've done our best to stay out of the limelight, especially as a family, but I would say as a woman, um, there are no biblical directives of how to be a minister's wife. That's not in there, but that is our calling because we are married to the man who's in ministry. And whether it's easy or difficult during that particular season, it is how we serve God. So, I mean, we should never roll our eyes at it. This is our service to God as we serve the man who's serving the Lord in vocational ministry. So, it is a sobering thing. But I'd like to say a few things about the kids. We've done our dead level best to make sure that our kids are not put in the limelight and allow them to be just sweaty little kids running through the church like everybody else. We refused to put them in any special category for any reason. And it would happen at times, but man, we didn't appreciate that, didn't want that for them, didn't want that for the church. But just a few thoughts here. It's so easy to give the kids the leftovers of your mind, even if you're at home. When the kids are at home and they're only a few short years, they deserve our heart and our mind and attention that the ministry can just suck right out of you if you're not careful. So, I mean, even if you have to write it down, just look at these kids in the eyes every night and dig into their minds and their hearts and spend time with them and love them, because that is our calling. That is our forever calling, is to be a couple and to love and nurture these kids and make home fun. Like I said, we bought a boat for the rickety old boat and drug them all over the lake for many, many years and slept in a ratty old tent. And I think that affected our girls in different ways, where our oldest will never put a foot in the tent again. And others would love that. But that's just how we love through our kids. But don't let the church babysit your kids. When church is over, you find your kids. Don't let them be running around. Sometimes serious things can happen after church or before church with other kids or even with our kids. So it's important to not let in any way that church environment be the nurturer or the babysitter of our kids.
Yeah, I really appreciate you speaking to that part of ministry pressures and in marriage, because like you've said, like you've alluded to, we get all these pressures from the outside and expectations of what we're supposed to look like, what we're supposed to do. And I mean, my kids got paraded through hundreds of churches, when they were little. And that was kind of a mistake that we made. And as Natalie came along, 6 years later, with that age gap there, and we're like, wow, I think we want to do this a little bit differently and help her see our ministry in a different light than, oh, it's now time to, sing the song in Zulu up in front of the church because that's what they expect. Now, I had one child that loved doing that and would volunteer to do that, but I had one that not so much.
Yeah.
We grow and we learn, but I think I like focusing on my responsibility is how can I help my kids love Jesus, love serving God, and not have what Kyle and I are called to do get in the way of that. And that takes intentionality. That takes my kids seeing us give them our best, not just what's left over at the end of the day.
Yeah. I think there's a few things that you guys said there that really just stood out as some key points there that have really resonated with us over the years. And that one of them was prioritizing family. And I think like Jerry, like you mentioned with the calendar, that has been a lesson I've had to learn, that if I'm truly prioritizing my family, I'm going to plan for my family and put it on the schedule. Because if I prioritize and plan for other things, if they're important to me, they go on the schedule, because otherwise that time gets eaten up. That means that time is important enough to put it on the schedule. And so that's been something that's been really important to do. Plan for those vacations, plan for our dates, plan for those things to make it important. Another one that was really kind of stood out was just saving energy for family and kids.
Yeah, I love that you said that.
Yeah, it's because that is, you may make it to the end of the day and you may be saving some time for them, but that's not the same thing, because you can be completely wiped out and spend 3 hours absolutely brain dead on the couch, and that's not really invested time. So we need to save some of that energy for them as well. And I think that's just such a great important thing. And I think kind of tied to some of that is that the idea of energy and prioritizing, that if we're prioritizing our family and our marriage, it's also going to be at the same time, it's kind of like a built-in burnout prevention, because it kind of keeps us in check. And so that kind of stood out as you were talking there, that's another benefit of that. And yeah, we just love to encourage. That's why we had you guys come to our regional conference a few years ago, just encouraging people to find a safe space to talk to people when they need to. And if you don't have that right around you, to encourage missionaries and pastors to find that safe space. Mm-hmm. And then just the last thing that has just kind of came to mind was, it was I can't remember where I heard this, but just the idea that at the end of your ministry, what you have left is your family. And if you've burnt bridges and focused 100% of your ministry and haven't maintained that relationships with your family, with your wife and your spouse and your kids, you're going to have a very empty time after your ministry is finished. And just that importance of making sure you keep that as a priority. Before we kind of wrap up and jump into the last little section there, is there anything else you guys would like to encourage married couples with?
Well, I know earlier Heather had mentioned like the fishbowl, and I think it looks different not only does it look different for missionaries versus maybe pastors in the States, it looks different for every family. And it seems like a common theme, Carl, that we're circling around is the comparison, is the expectations. And it's okay if family A, maybe the same amount of kids, maybe the same age kids, still looks different than family B. And the passage that Char and I really rest in, again, Paul writing to the Corinthians, it's not the one who commends themselves that's approved. It's the one that the Lord commends. And Char and I, and people in ministry, we love people. That's why it's a gift that God gives us. And we want people to in the right way, be happy with us. We love in the right way, them applaud us with the correct motive. But there's the decisions we have to make, and as to what you were saying earlier, Kyle, that sometimes people aren't going to get it. They're not going to understand. And this is where Char and I have to look at each other and say, it's a little painful, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter if they're not commending us in this area. If the Lord is commending us, and we want to make sure we're right on this, and we're hearing Him correctly, we're reading the scriptures correctly, that's what matters. And in many cases, they do come alongside us, but that's not true in all cases. And I'm going to circle back around real quick. And my friend, who a little bit later in life, who I told you spoke to my heart, he was my counselor, and there was a crisis I was going through, and I remember calling him. And when he picked up the phone, I said, "Look, this isn't for my members. I'm calling you for me." And here's what he said to me: "You picked a bad time to call. Bye." No, he said, "Call me in 2 weeks. Bye." And he hung up the phone. And I looked at Char. And I thought, I can't believe this. In my flesh, I'm thinking, like, you're kidding me. As many times as we've had him speak at Grace, we financially support him. Well, he told me after 2 weeks, the only reason I picked up the phone, I thought it was my mom because I told my wife and kids, I don't care who's calling. I don't care what crisis is out there. Unless it's my mother who's a widow, we're getting away for 2 weeks.
Hmm.
So in a matter of 15 seconds, he got off the phone with me. Now, as I sat there, within 2 or 3 minutes, I began to think like, I don't know what's going on. I'll find out later. But I think I respect this guy even more.
Hmm.
So there's one of those where, wow, he had to really apply that. Okay, right now, Jerry may or may not be commending me, but it doesn't matter. I made a commitment to my family, and they deserve this, and we're getting away. So that's another example of how God used, not just him, but God used this particular gentleman who's now in heaven in many practical ways to just teach me some good lessons.
Hmm. Some good lessons on boundaries there of setting some clear guidelines there to abide by, whether it's vacations or even on a regular basis. That's a great, great helpful thing. Anything else for you, Char?
I loved what Heather said regarding the children and dragging them through years of ministry, and that's different for every family. But I think it's important to not push our kids. And Heather, I was so glad that you said that it's not. We should not use our children as utilities in ministry, and remember that they are a soul accountable to God, and not push them into responsibilities that they don't want to do, or they're spiritually not ready for that responsibility, but allow, as parents, the Lord to nurture them in their own personal relationship, not because we force them into a lifestyle that mirrors and complements us in ministry. We kind of learned that early in our life, and we were thankful for that because our kids, well, certainly not perfectly, but I feel like they have returned back to the Lord independently, not because we forced them or manipulated them or shamed them, but because it was fresh and a beautiful thing to turn their face to the Lord as a young adult and say, I love you, I want to serve you.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
You mentioned a little bit about this. I just wanted to come back just a little bit, but just that idea, the idea of when you called your friend there and how he'd really set some clear boundaries there. Are there any other boundary things that you guys have learned or observed that you found to be helpful, or just even some specific questions you use to ask to yourself to set some clear boundaries to guard the time with your spouse or your children?
Yeah, we know this too. Obviously, those in ministry we're not given a pass for anybody to abuse their time, because you have to be disciplined in the ministry, because often there's not that accountability that another person may have in their vocation. But that's usually the exception. We're talking about the rule seems to be pastors and missionaries and their families are just getting overwhelmed, just having challenges with time management. So I think it's going to circle back around to communication. And really, I'm going to speak to the men here and know who you are. And if you're a guy who's driven, I mean, Char used to say to me, Jerry, I think you're a workaholic. And, I would just like, yeah, right. I mean, I would just totally ignore that. And it was years in the ministry. I'm reading a book, and this book had like 8 descriptions of a workaholic. 6 of those had my name on it. So I don't know. I mean, if it was pride that was, because let me just speak into that real quick for all of us who are Christ followers. Pride is our most dangerous sin, because I know when I've lost my temper. I know when I'm lying. I know when I'm lusting, but I don't know when I'm priding. It repackages itself and can look like it's humble. So this proudness that not listening to Char. Well, what? And I love the fact. First of all, I want to make sure I'm clear. She is my greatest encouragement, hands down, capital E. And we love spending time together. So I'm just thinking, well, of course she'd love to have me hanging around. What wife wouldn't want their husband hanging around? But I got work to do. And I think the Christian life to me is so many fine lines. And she goes, well, yeah, I understand that, Jerry, but won't you chart your hours? Because
never went over well.
yeah. So I'm not for sure if we're hitting your exact question there, but the communication coming around and listening to Char or whoever your wife is, and if she's saying, "Look, obviously, I want you to work hard. We never want to take you from your responsibilities that you owe God," but they can get blurred into responsibilities that we think we owe people. And again, I think we all understand true emergencies and crises. That's a no-brainer. Car wreck, someone just died. Okay, that our kids would get it. Hey, this is a real crisis here, and I'll make up for the time that we're going to lose. And because I do have to go see this family. Now, that hasn't happened a lot over 40 years, but it has happened. But those are legitimate. What we have to be careful about is letting people who are out of control us. And the truth is, Jerry, I tell myself, this marriage from this couple from your church, it's been going south for 7 years, 10 years. And all of a sudden it comes to a head. "Oh, Pastor, if we don't see you tonight, I don't know what we're going to do." And here's what I started to practice about 10, 15 years ago. "Hey, tonight's not going to work." "Oh, but Pastor, please." Hang on now. Don't we believe God is sovereign? Yes. Okay. Tonight's not working, which means God wants us to get together at another evening so everybody's ready. So I'm going to read a couple scriptures with you here on the phone. I'm going to pray with you guys. And then how about Thursday evening at 7:00? It was amazing. It was like, now it seems so simple looking back, but Kyle and Heather, it took me a while to get there. And once I began to practice that, oh, well, thank you, Pastor. And Thursday night we met. But boy, my early days, okay, I can be over there in 30 minutes. And I don't know why I fell for that.
Well, I'm going to stand up for my husband and say that we did have those who discipled us in the ministry in the seminary that we went to, and our family, they pushed us hard to work hard, and that was ingrained in him. So yeah, communication was important in that. But I'd like to say a word for communication. Sometimes the right thing to say, but at the wrong time, can just make that communication fall on its face. So we, both of us learned, but the timing of and the way we word our communication with our spouse is so important. Not when we're angry or when we haven't had a moment to just suck back in our emotions and pray through, especially an important situation. So it is important not to just speak what's right, but time the speaking to the right time when the hearer is ready to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'll give Char a high score for that. There's just times she knows that, all right, Jerry's getting alone with God, and he's going to work through it, and we'll talk about it here in a couple of hours, and when he's had some quiet time. And I'm going to give her a pretty high score for practicing that very consistently.
Well, and I'm going to give him a high score for getting away with God and working through those passions that are inside working in him. So.
No, absolutely. It's pretty amazing how God designed, couples to help work together, and how I, as a wife, can create space for Kyle to be with God and vice versa, or be able to get each other's tasks done. I think that's a season that we're in right now, being very busy and having kids on, both sides of the ocean and trying to juggle all of that, like you guys know. But moving our communication to a level of, how can I help you get done what you need to do this week? And here's what I need from you? And I don't know why it's taken us 20 some years to start saying those
It's
specific
a
things.
journey.
But it really is for our season right now, the communication piece and asking each other the right questions has
Mhm.
been so helpful, a real game changer.
Yeah.
And we
Absolutely.
also noticed that, we're each gifted differently too. So
Yes.
the something on my plate that, when you talk about energy drainers, well, for Heather to do it, it may be something that's in her gifting set, and it takes her an hour or whatever to do it, but it doesn't take up like a day's worth of energy. Where if I were to tackle that task, maybe it takes me 2 or 3 hours, but it takes up like a day's worth of energy. And so learning to help each other with some of those tasks and trade back and forth on things and seeing how we can help each other with those things has been really helpful. So yeah, thank you so much for just sharing all that you've shared there. It's just so helpful to be able to get people to be thinking about their marriage and prioritizing that, putting that first. Um, I just read a quote the other day. It says, "If you don't prioritize your time, somebody else will."
Yes.
And that's we have Jerry, as you're mentioning those different things you were saying to be able to help guard that schedule, that time was so important, and having some of those preloaded things. And that's gonna be different for everybody
Yes.
what those are. But if I guess I would just encourage people to figure out as a couple what those are,
Mhm.
decide on those even together of like, hey, this is when someone asks us something, this is our preloaded response. And so you're not fumbling with it, but having a couple of things like that you can use as your statement, even if it's like, hey, you know what, I'm gonna need to check with my wife on that and I'll get back to you.
Yeah.
It saves you time. You can go and it buys you time to be able to talk about it and then get back. And so it's not a rush answer. And even just something like that can be a go-to all the time. And be able to allow you some space to be able to make a good decision on how you're going to invest your time. So that's great. At the end of every podcast, we like to ask people a few random fun questions.
Okay.
And so, what's something you've recently read or listened to that you've enjoyed or found helpful?
Well, God has just in the last maybe 5 or 6 years just redirected my attention to biblical archaeology and creation apologetics. And I turn it on every day on YouTube, and I'm a sponge. I love it. Not just it doesn't confirm my faith; it just energizes my faith, and not just for me personally, but it gives me such a passion to be able to teach this to our women at our church, which I do often, and also especially to our young children as they are trying to figure out what the world is now saying about the authentication of scripture and science, etc., and what believers, Christians, are saying about those same topics. So that's exciting for me. We were just in Israel in May, and I just,
Mm.
every site was more exciting than the next, just because I'm standing now in the place that the Bible had talked about, and so those are new things that I've been doing the last few years, and I'm enjoying that. It's kind of a diversion from just straight up ministry issues as well.
And I
Yeah,
really
is there a
enjoy.
specific YouTube channel that
Oh
you
yeah.
watch or
Yes, there is the one my highest rated would be Associates for Biblical Research. They've probably got now 200 videos of all topics. They're very biblically based, but I mean you could just get lost in their volumes of information. Regarding biblical sites, biblical topics that apply to the world methods today. They're great. I love listening to Elisa Childers, Sean McDowell, Joel Kramer. He's on Expedition Bible. So I mean, and that list can go on and on. But Titus Kennedy is a young biblical archaeologist and a biblical apologist. So they're out there, and thankfully, over probably the last decade, the Christian world is now standing back up to say, we're not going to take the beating the world has given us in science and archaeology. We are looking at the same evidence, and the Bible, it has been time and time again proven to be accurate and applicable for all topics. And it really energizes me to not just learn it for myself, but to share it. I'm going to do, hopefully this fall, a conference at our church for our children regarding biblical archaeology, scripture, and creation, and just give them a foundation to say what they're hearing in school is the same evidence as we are studying as biblicists, but they're interpreting it two different ways. And we do have strong evidence that everything in the Bible is perfectly accurate. So I'm enjoying that.
That's great.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe we're living in the day of the golden age of apologetics. So we're so fortunate. There's so many resources out there. And I really enjoy reading. And again, this is where we don't compare ourselves among one another, because I'm at the stage, my kids are all grown, and we have 3 other pastors. There's a lot of guys out there. They're kind of solo pastors, solo missionaries over at church. But the apologetics is something that I really enjoy, and then sharing that with our own congregation and challenging them. But I also, when young pastors, because I'm that age now, they ask, "Hey, Jerry, what's some books you recommend?" And I always say this: well, find you some books, find you some authors. For me, it was Tozer. There's others, A.W. Tozer, that deal with personal worship. Now, you also need to read books on the ministry and corporate worship, but make sure, back to that 1 Timothy 4:16, taking heed to yourself, make sure you're reading good books on personal worship. Something that's going to direct your heart, mind, and soul towards God. And then apologetics. I like reading authors outside of my personal theological persuasion for a number of reasons. That encourages me, challenges me, sometimes frustrates me, and it either confirms my own belief system or causes me maybe to revise it.
Yeah. Hey, what activities or hobbies do you guys like to do to stay energized or refreshed?
Oh,
You
now
still
you're
camp?
talking our language here.
You're
And no, we are day hikers, and we enjoy hiking. Meaning, we come back to our room in the evening, but we try to get away now, like 2 weeks at a time, sometimes 3 weeks at a time. Again, we can do that because we have multiple pastors. And we'll try to, in that 2-week period, set a goal, and we've accomplished that in the last couple of years, of 100 miles of hiking. So that's usually 8 to 12 miles a day. But again, coming back to our room, have a nice place to sleep and a nice meal. We're only 5 hours from the Smoky Mountains, so that's a very popular place for us, even if we only get 2 or 3 days. And then probably in the United States, our favorite area would be the Seattle area, the parks that are up there. But this is something we both enjoy, even if it's day hikes right here at the house. After a meal, we'll go out 3 or 4 miles in the area. But our hobbies, traveling, hiking, and reading. And there's something we both enjoy doing and doing together.
Very good. Anything else, Char, you wanted to add to that?
No, because
Okay,
I
that's good.
share that with him. Yeah, we loved. We walked 9 miles just yesterday, so it's healthy for us. We're in our 60s now, so we don't have that youthful energy. We're fighting for that more. We do. I'll throw a plug in here. We do our best to eat healthy. We're nearly off of sugar. And we find that we have more energy eating the fruits and vegetables as opposed to what's easy to grab on the way out the door. And
Yes.
I unfortunately, for my kids' sake at the time, I made that switch when they were young. They weren't real happy with me about that, but they're all kind of health conscious now because we are. I'll just spiritualize this. God gave us our bodies, and it's important to take good care of them. So we're fighting for more energy. now in our age than we had when we were young, but it's still there.
That's
Well,
great.
with that, I'd like to add this real quick because all four of us commented on this. It was Spurgeon who said regarding rest and so forth. He made this comment in his writings, of course, but tired Christians make bad decisions. And we have a lot of Bible examples of that. Our mind usually goes to Elijah, doesn't it? But he says, don't ever underestimate the importance of a good night's rest. And the older we get in ministry, we realize to be able to sleep through the night, that's a gift from God because it doesn't happen often.
That's so true.
Absolutely. Is there a resource, tool, app, or life hack that you've found helpful?
A number of years ago, the church purchased for me the Logos program, and that's just invaluable. Your multiple translations, and of course your commentaries, and we know how it works. Most of us, these Bible programs that you have, but that's the one that I have, showing you the Hebrew and the Greek. And then I again, fortunate enough, I have a book allowance. So, but that I would probably encourage someone, whether it doesn't have to be Logos, but find a good Bible program and take advantage of it.
That's good.
I would say, I do keep my YouTube subscriptions going on throughout the day if I'm home. But I do enjoy discipling and encouraging younger women. And there is an excellent book out there called Growing Together. And it's by Melissa B. Kruger, Growing Together by Melissa B. Kruger. Now, it allows a woman to speak with another woman who is young in her faith and needs to grow, or it can also encourage great conversations from two women who just want to have godly conversation. And I've used it for both. And obviously, any book that's written by humans, you're going to have to take a little bit of grain of salt with an opinion here or there. But this is to my mind, a biblically sound book that I have used over the years very often. And I would recommend that book.
Great. Thanks for the resource. Thanks so much for joining us today on the Missions Life podcast.
Yep. It has been an absolute joy to just spend this time with you. Thank you so much.
Well, it's been our joy. We say that with all sincerity. We appreciate the opportunity to talk with you guys.
Yeah, we miss seeing you.
Oh, yeah. Hopefully we can swing by your place here soon.
Yeah, we'd love
that. Would be great.
Well, that's all for this show, and we want to thank you again for spending your valuable time with us today.
If you enjoyed this episode, please consider taking just a moment and giving us a great review. Your review will help people find the podcast and allow these resources to encourage more people. If you took something valuable away from this episode, please share it with someone who would enjoy it.
If you'd like to find the show notes, blog posts, and free resources for ministry and leadership, as well as some information on my book, Overflowing, visit KyleFarran.com. That's KyleFarran.com. Hope to see you soon on a future podcast.